Thank you again for speaking with us. I do want to get into the takedown though, because I was listening to the episodes and literally smiling and like kicking my heels because I haven't gotten that far in clearly, but it is a rom-com. What was it about this story that you loved?
Oh gosh. Well, I fell in love with Lily's first book first, and that was the book that was presented to me, and they asked me to do three books total. And so at that point, when I signed on, I was like, well, I don't know what the next two books are, but I cannot wait. And I was pleasantly surprised that the following books after the first one were just completely different. They were still in her world, in this world in Toronto, and young women like living in the city and trying to figure out their stuff. But I think what's unique to her writing is that there's just this stylized humor in the narration. You really get to get into the character's head because it's her, it's Dee. Dee is the main character, the protagonist of the third book, and you get to hear all of her inner thoughts, which I think are hilarious.
I was going to say Dee is so neurotic and type A, but also I think very highly relatable, kind of a dork. Can you talk a little bit about the journey in this character and what you found relatable? I love that she starts the day with affirmations. So I'm also wondering, like, do you have a go-to affirmation?
um, Gosh, I don't know if it's so much an affirmation as much as it's just like a daily thing that I have to remind myself, which is to breathe. um, I think living in New York, things can get a little crazy sometimes. So I often find if there's anything that I'm telling myself, it's just to breathe.
That's a good one. I do that too because sometimes I think we just need to realize like just stay grounded. It's all good. This probably is not going to be a life or death situation, especially these days when there really are life or death situations out there. I also, I was thinking about it. I think it's so incredible that you're able to be a storyteller using just your voice. And then I remembered, well, of course, she's doing that with music all the time. Was there a unique challenge in taking on this role for an audio original?
Yeah, the unique challenge is that you're alone in a booth, and a lot of it the first time I heard it out loud was just reading it out loud in the booth recording. Obviously, I had read the story before going into the booth and had my research in terms of pronunciation and accents and which character has which voice. There's a lot of homework involved, but really like hearing it out loud for the first time is just me there in the booth with the engineer and the director listening in. And I think it keeps it really fresh in that way. It feels like a little bit like a cold read, like if you're reading a script for the first time. But what I love is that if you mess up, you can go and again, and you don't have to worry. But there is like a freshness and a spontaneity that I think comes from reading out loud for the first time. So really my job is just to do all the homework so that once I get into the booth, I can just read and have freedom, let it fly.
It sounds like a perfect job because you could literally,
Yeah.
I mean, people probably tell you this all the time, but you could like roll out of bed in like PJs. Not that you would, but you could do that in theory. So I'm wondering, are there certain things that you do to prep your voice, especially because you've been a musical artist for so long?
Yeah, I mean, a little warm up, doing some, articulation warm ups, and making sure that, I'm not just coming in like having rolled out of bed. Although that might be helpful some days if I need like a lower, sultry voice. Um, and then, if this is going to sound so crazy and weird, but making sure that you eat at the right time because you can't be hungry because otherwise your stomach's going to growl and the mic is going to pick that up. And you also can't be too full because your stomach is digesting.
As a
So there's
podcaster, that's like the number one fear is like drinking something bubbly or like eating too big a meal and having like some tension here. So I totally get you.
Yeah, yeah. You're basically eating for fuel. You're not eating for fun. So something light that will sustain you, you know, protein so that you can go and you don't get hungry. And then I would say, just making sure that like anything that I know that I'm going to probably hit that day, like an accent, that I just do like a little refresher. And then, yeah.
Being third generation Asian American, some of that in identity and honoring your family and all of those relatable things about living under one roof with your family that can be so frustrating and not always so relatable to someone who isn't in that same position. So for me, that was something I really appreciated. But I'm wondering, is there something about the story that you also um, really loved bringing to life for audiences?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, I think I really relate to what you're saying about seeing an Asian American, well, Asian who's living in Toronto, so Asian Canadian um, woman who is navigating, and this is something that I had to do very often as a child, navigating everything that it means to come from a mixed race family. And I think there's like a cultural aspect, but I also think that there's just a level of understanding that just comes with being around, um, you know, different cultures your entire life. You're sort of like, you feel in between. So therefore, you don't necessarily feel one or the other, but you feel both. And I think that that's like something that's like super valuable that I wish that I could explain to people in like, you know, a sentence because I found it so valuable growing up. Um, but I think this book does a really good job at, you know, displaying a beautiful like mixed race family that is navigating their own stuff. And I think, you know, and I did another interview and someone said this and I was like, that's exactly it, which is specificity is clarity. That, you know, we don't have to over explain things, that we just present real people living their lives in, you know, conflicting situations. And then we sort of, we get an opening, an understanding into their lives because we have this specific character. Um, and then, you know, just in terms of um, her story as becoming an adult, and learning how to make healthy boundaries with her loved ones and figuring that out, and making healthy boundaries with herself in her work, in her relationships. You know, I think that's something that's pretty universal regardless of, you know, what your cultural upbringing is. You know, we're all trying to figure out our place in this world, and Dee's perspective and her sense of humor, I think, is a really fun way to see that unfold for a character.
I loved hearing Dee come to life with your voice and looking forward to so many other projects very soon, I hope, especially with everything going on. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.